Well, I'm here with Bryan and Neil Hughes in the Adobe booth, and as you know, Adobe's just announced Adobe Photoshop CS4, and this is a really major update to the package. I myself have been really amazed at just the breadth and depth of the changes they made. So Bryan, how would you characterize the changes that have come in CS4?
Yeah, there's obviously a tremendous amount. We have all new things in Bridge, Camera Raw, Photoshop CS4, and Extended. But if I were to really put it in three buckets, which I like to just sort of make it easy to digest, I would say that performance, things like hardware acceleration, 64-bit on Windows, things of that nature, ease of use, simplification, what I like to refer to as polish of existing features and making them that much easier. And then of course magic. Photoshop always has magic. CS4 Extended certainly has a ton of magic. So really a fantastic balance of features, polish, and performance. Okay, so one of the things here in Bridge that I can do is I can multi-select files. I can hit Command-B, and I now have a hardware accelerated preview. Let's add a couple more there, bounce back in, and I have a carousel mode. At any point, if I want to move into Camera Raw, I can just hit Command-R and make any sort of change that I want to make. Maybe I want to warm that up some. I hit Done, and I come back. So just a really fast, OpenGL, hardware accelerated way to move through my files, edit and sort them. So that's what it looks like in Bridge. Let's pop out of here and take a look at what these hardware accelerated features look like in Photoshop. One of the first things I should show you, let's change screen modes and go to a zoom ratio we wouldn't normally go to, which is 33.33%. What's great in Photoshop CS4 is because we're piping things directly through the GPU, everything looks great at every different resolution. If I zoom in, I have a nice hardware accelerated, smooth, flicker-free zoom. Eventually I'll pick up a little pixel grid there. I even have some toss physics. For those of you who have MacBook Airs or MacBook Pros, all of these are tied into multi-touch gestures as well. We've worked with Apple to license those APIs. If I do something like hit my H key and click, I'll get a bird's eye view where I can snap back, see my image. Let's pull back and I'll show you what brushes look like with the new hardware accelerated features. I can select a brush and preview the size directly on my document. I can even see the opacity of the brush directly on the document. And when it comes to something like healing and selecting an area, I now see it clipped to the brush directly there on the image. The last thing I'll show you is the fact that I can take the new Rotate View tool, and for those using a tablet or doing illustration or retouching, you can rotate your entire view, and even if you have a selection or guides, it will respect the original orientation of your image. You're just altering the view. Okay, so what I'd like to show you now are some significant changes we've made to how you work with adjustment layers and masks. In the past, if you wanted to add an adjustment layer, you'd need to come down into the layer menu, you'd need to know it was there, go to a submenu, launch a dialog, adjust it, click OK or cancel, name it, and then continue. Now, any and all users, as soon as they come into Photoshop CS4, will enjoy the benefits of adjustment layers immediately here. I can click on curves if I want to see that larger. I can click here. What's really great, and when we talk about making this a user experience improvement, is I can interact directly with the curve without even having the interface here. So I can make the dark areas darker, the light areas lighter, without even knowing how curves work. If I tab back my interface, I see that sure enough, I've made a nice S-shaped curve, but I didn't know how curves worked, and I've added a curves adjustment layer. Of course, the benefits here of adjustment layers is they're re-editable. I have all of these blend modes. Let's look at another area where we improved that. Hue saturation. Rather than having to guess, is this guy's tie red, orange, yellow, somewhere in between, I just click directly on it, and as I click, the appropriate slider pulls. I can desaturate or saturate really quickly and easily. The concrete on the right there, if I want to make that less green, I don't need to know if it's green or yellow. I just grab it and pull.
Well, those are some great ease of use improvements. I could certainly use that, but now everybody wants to see the magic. What have you got for us in the magic department?
Luckily, I have lots of magic to show you today. Let's just jump in and take a look. So let's start with depth of field. In this particular image that we're going to look at, we have 7 different layers, and as you can see, each one is focused on a different area. The other thing that's happening is my exposure varies as I go. So what I want to do is I want to come through and select all of those and come into my new auto blend layers. Photoshop can tell the difference between a panorama and a stack of images immediately. As I click OK, Photoshop will look at each and every one of those 7 layers. It'll look at each component. It'll look at its focus. It'll look at the exposure. It'll look at the alignment and the blending. And what I want to get back here is one image that's perfectly exposed and perfectly focused throughout. You can think of this as effectively buying yourself light and getting a better exposure from a variety of different images. You can see very quickly, before and after, not only do we have a better exposure, but everything is in focus, and we've built a very detailed mask on the fly. This is the sort of thing that would take a skilled retoucher a day, 2 days to come up with something like this. Really powerful. One of my frustrations as a photographer has always been that full frame images don't often conform to your standard frame. So maybe it's wanting to make a 5x8 into a 5x7, or an 8x12 into an 8x10, 11x17 into an 11x14. It really starts to get tricky when you don't want to crop the image. So let's make a selection of this image. And one of the things that you'll see here is if I come to the new content-aware scaling, I can pull in and I will start to throw away information that's unimportant. Sand, water, rocks, all of that, we'll just toss it aside. What's great is I can even extend this, pull it even further than where we originally began, and Photoshop is adding sand, water, rocks, sky. We can even go so far as to protect a particular part of the selection. So where those guys had longboards, now that I've loaded a particular selection, they're fixed and everything looks as it should. So you can imagine the workflow with a frame or something like that, or stretching something to fit a billboard. Imagine a mobile device, or wanting to take graphics and fit them to a particular resolution. You can even type in the specific resolution that you want. We introduced the notion of 3D in Photoshop in CS3 Extended, and there are a number of distinctions. I can't possibly get into them all, but I will say that not only can you import all of the 3D file formats that you could before, but for the most part you can export those as well. So your 3D experience can live beyond Photoshop. 3D is no longer a modal state. You no longer have to click on a 3D layer and enter a 3D world. If you have a 3D layer, you're just working in 3D. You can see we actually have a 3D layer and a 2D layer here. Let's go ahead and line those up. And what's great about Photoshop truly working in 3D is I can take my 2D information, I can put it where I'd like it to be, I can treat it like a normal layer and bake it right down into my 3D object, and you'll see that it now respects the lighting, the texture, the reflection, and all of the information of the 3D file. If I want to do something really powerful like paint, I can go ahead and just choose any color that I want, and all I have to do is paint directly on my image, and I'm painting in 3D. I'm honoring all of the different parameters of my 3D object right there. The last thing I'll show you here with 3D is that if I want to move back up so we can see the inside of the car, I can use selections to view different things with my 3D object. Again, I'm just changing my view. All I want to do is hide the nearest surface, which is the paint and the reflection, and then hide the next nearest surface so that I can see the interior of the car. If I were to choose a different color here, we can grab something like that, grab our paintbrush, maybe make a smaller brush, and now we can paint right there with that area revealed. And once I come back up here and say, let's go ahead and reveal all surfaces, we're right back to where we started. All we did was temporarily hide that, and sure enough, if we rotate the car, you can see we've painted the inside of it. So just completely overhauling the entire 3D experience. There's obviously so much more magic to show there, but that gives you just a taste, just a little bit of what we're doing there.
Well, Bryan, that's an incredible package you showed us, and of course we've just barely touched the tip of the iceberg here. There's layers and layers, no pun intended, below all that. This is phenomenal. Like I said, I can't wait to get my hands on it myself. When's it going to be hitting the street?
We're working on it. We're wrapping up. We want to make sure that, as usual, everything is very good quality, very robust. So I can't comment on exactly when it'll come out, but certainly well before Christmas.
Great. In time for Christmas. I'm going to have one under my tree for sure.